Hello, hope all is well. So thought I'd put together a quick video on a free ambient style guitar tone. So extremely clean with lots of delay and reverb, only using free plugins. Now just a quick thing before we start, and that is effect sends or parallel busing or using the plugins in series on the actual track. And in the examples that I'm showing, most of them will be with, say, the reverb that's on the actual track itself. But the other way of doing it, and it's one that I would actually recommend, would be to have the reverb on its separate bus. As that's maybe a bit more complicated to set up, depending on how familiar you are with a DAW, I've kept things really simple. So I'm using most of the plugins in series on the tracks. But just to show you the difference, here are two examples. One is with all the plugins in series, and the second one is with the delay on the main track, and then the reverb is on its separate bus. And the reverb will be set to 100% wet. When you're using effects in series, you'll be using the mix to dial in how much of said effect that you want affecting the signal. So as you can hear, the one with the reverb on its separate effect send or parallel bus, as it were, it sounds cleaner, but it's also louder, so that might affect things somewhat. My recommendation, or what I usually do, is that I put delays as inserts onto the track, depending on what I'm mixing or what I'm using, and then I keep a reverb on a separate effect send or a bus, because that means that you can send multiple tracks into the same reverb. To keep things really simple, however, on the examples I'm showing here, I've kept things on the same track, so it's really easy for you just to try different plugins, depending on what DAW you're using or what interface you're using, onto the track that's recording your guitar, and then you have a really easy way of seeing how they sound. And to set up parallel buses or effect sends, I'd suggest reading up on that on YouTube if you're not familiar with that, and then see how to do that with your DAW of choice. So I'm using Reaper as my DAW, and in essence we're looking at three ingredients. So we have a compressor, we have a delay, and then a reverb, and that's basically it. There's a few tricks that we can use to sort of spruce things up, but I'll go through the basic ingredients for now, and of course all the links are in the description below. So first off, I'm using the DAW's basic compressor, in this case ReaCOMP. It's a free plugin if you want to download it, but your DAW will most likely have a compressor that you might already be familiar with, so I'd suggest using that one. But for the purposes of this video, I decided to use this one, as it's also something that you can download for free. So without changing any of the settings, so these are the default settings that it opens with. So a ratio of 4:1, attack of 3, there's a release of about 100. And all I'm doing here is I'm lowering the threshold, so there's quite a bit of compression on the guitar signal itself. Dial this to taste, of course, depending on how much compression you want. But as we're not using an amp, which is something I'll mention as well, you want usually a fair amount of compression to get that kind of amp-like feel, I guess, of compression. And then I'm boosting the output a bit, just to get a bit more level within the actual tones that we're getting here. So yeah, without the compressor, I wouldn't have the sort of level that I'd want, and it also is doing something quite nice to the actual signal itself. So the delay that we'll be using today is Deelay with two E's, which is a delay which was made by Sixth Sample in collaboration with Audio. And it's this really nice sounding delay with a lot of sort of modern options on there. So there's a lot of controls on here, but basically what you're going to be looking at, or to have a basic understanding of what's going on, is that you have a delay that has a lot of modifiers on there. So for example, over here we have modulation that we can add to the signal. We also have like tape flutter and things like that we can add, so it gives more a characteristic of an analog style delay. We have a low cut and high cut, which is incredibly useful, especially the low cut I find, which I'm using here to sort of clean up the low mids per se. We have a ducker if you want to use that. We won't be using that here. And we also have additional diffusion controls. And over here we have the feedback, which is the amount of repeats that you're going to be getting. The spread, which is sort of the stereo spread that we were looking at. And it's useful when using in conjunction with ping pong mode enabled, so that we're getting delay signals that go from one to the other. And then over here we have our dry and our wet control. If you're using this in a purely wet situation, so 100% wet, you would turn off the dry signal here. In this case, I'm using it on the actual track itself. So I'm dialing back the amount of wet to get the sort of amount of delay that I want. And now add to that reverb, which is the final component that we'll be looking at here. So this was released fairly recently, I think, and it's a free ambient reverb by Variety of Sound called epicCLOUDS. There was a reverb or free reverb they had before, which I think is Epic Reverb, which sounded great as well. But we'll be looking at epicCLOUDS in this case, which is an ambient reverb. And it's very simple to use, and I haven't really changed anything here. These are the stock settings. I've pulled back a bit on the wet signal as we're running in line with the rest of our plugins, and I've just changed the quality to high, and low cut is on. So yes, it's really lovely, lush, big reverb per se. But we do have another option, which is Valhalla Supermassive. And it's sort of set up in a different kind of way. So as you hear here, we have a delay and a warp. So it's sort of like delays that are sort of constantly feeding back into each other. And it has loads of different presets on here. So you have stuff ranging from various different echoes, modulation, reverbs, some fun kind of special effects style things, and other things that you can try out. So as you can hear, Supermassive does a lot of different things. You could actually use just Supermassive, to be honest, for some ambient tones. And I'll show some examples later on of, say, just using Supermassive for all sorts of different tones. But for the purposes of this video, the easiest I find is using Deelay for your delay, and then using epicCLOUDS for reverb. And that's what you heard during the intro. Now, since we're in our DAW, we can use a combination of effects, for example. We can use multiple channels and things like that. So here's something that I'd suggest trying is stacking delay plugins, for example. So in this example, we're going to be using two instances of the delay plugin. So as you can see on both of them, they're set up exactly the same now. But what we can do, which is a lot of fun, is setting one of the delays to be, say, a quarter note. And we'll turn off ping pong for this example on this one. And the other one we'll leave at a dotted eighth note in ping pong mode. And the only thing I might add here is maybe let's keep this one a bit cleaner, shall we say, a bit more digital. And we'll see how that sounds. So as you can hear, by combining or stacking delays, we can get different things going on with the tap tempos. So there are a few combinations that you can try out, but in essence, if you keep one a bit slower than the other and try variations of, say, dotted eighth or dotted quarter note even, with a quarter note on the other, for example, you can get these nice cascading style delay sounds. And then if you add that together with, say, reverb, you get this really lush, wide sounding ambient sound. And in this next example, I'm just going to be using Valhalla Supermassive. So I've got the compressor out front, and I'm using 3 instances of Valhalla Supermassive. So one's going to be for the chorus, one's going to be for delay, and then the last one's going to be for a big ambient reverb. So as you can hear there, you've got quite a few different options, and I'll just say experiment. I mean, within a DAW you can stack as many kind of effects or plugins as you like, and try and find something that you like within there. And the reasoning of using, say, no amp, and you can use an amp and a cab, is you get this more hi-fi and this really lush kind of sound, and I think different bands kind of use that to their advantage as well. And you've seen this in maybe Neural DSP's Pliny plugin, that I think one of the amps has like a blend knob, so that you have a blend of like the DI signal to get a different kind of clean tone to that. And it's also something that I use on some of my fractal presets, on the ambient presets, where I'm either blending in a certain amount of like a DI, sort of the dry signal as it were, and then also using an amp and a cab for different effects. And you can do this as well within the DAW by simply opening up another track and then say have both of those armed for recording. So in this next example, I'll have one track that has a free amp sim on there and a delay, and then also another track that has the delay and just the compressor and delay on there. But in this example, I'll be using a separate effects bus, but only for the reverb. So I'll have 2 tracks going where I'll be having delays on each separate track, and then they'll be feeding into a separate or parallel bus that will just have the reverb on that. And then with this example, what you can do is basically use the faders on the actual tracks themselves to basically blend in how much of, say, the amp tone that you want, and then how much of, say, the DI tone that you want, and then also dial in the amount of reverb that you want there. So the last point I'll make on this is basically parallel busing or not. The reason why I showed most of these examples with everything in series is that if you're not used to using plugins per se, or used to using a DAW, this is the easiest way of putting a tone together. I will say that you will get cleaner results, I think, having the reverb on a separate bus, and then you can use fun tricks like I did before with using multiple tracks, but they're sending into the same reverb. And the only thing I'll note to watch out for are low cuts on your reverb and delays. Luckily, the plugins I'm showing here, they have these built in, but that's something to bear in mind when mixing later on, to not get too much build up in especially the low mids and the lows. So I hope that was useful. As said, there's a lot of really good free plugins out there, either for your amp tones or guitar effects and things like that. And hopefully this gave you some idea of how you can use those to put together an ambient tone, either for layering or even just messing around. And the only real thing to watch out for is clipping the output. But as long as you keep an eye on the levels, and especially using the compressor to get your levels right, that shouldn't be a problem. In any case, thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, please drop a like and subscribe, as it really helps me out. Thanks.